Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on the 7th of April. Joining me tonight to talk about the big news stories of the day are Ashraf, Danish, a list candidate for the SNP and Broadcasting Scotland regular Kat Cary. Good evening to you both. Before we
Evening.
go on to today's stories, I'll just run through the coronavirus statistics as of 2 o'clock today. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,846,486 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,625,704 have been confirmed negative, with 220,782 testing positive. There are 259 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 5 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive, and the number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 7,619. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 192 were in hospital last night, 21 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 o'clock this morning, 2,593,932 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 479,239 had received their second. The latest UK daily figures show 126,927 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 45 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. The first big story of today is that Nicola Sturgeon has been unveiling her plans to remobilise the NHS in Scotland. She unveiled plans to massively increase both elective and short-term hospital capacity across Scotland as she urged voters to back the SNP to help the NHS remobilise after the COVID-19 pandemic. In a speech delivered today, the SNP leader confirmed that on top of the 6 elective treatment centres already in development, an SNP government would establish 2 more in Ayrshire and in Cumbernauld, as well as renewing the Edinburgh Eye Pavilion. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Next week, our manifesto will set out the levels of investment we intend to commit to our NHS and social care services over the next term of Parliament. However, I can confirm today that should we be re-elected, the SNP will deliver and implement a plan for the full-scale post-pandemic remobilisation of our NHS. Central to this plan will be a commitment to increase within the first year of the new Parliament inpatient, day case and outpatient treatment activity by 10% compared to pre-pandemic activity levels, and then to maintain that level for the rest of the term. This plan is already well developed and in the early stages of deployment. Today I will set out more details of our approach and just some of the actions we will take as we remobilise the NHS for the future. Crucial to our efforts will be the new NHS Centre for Sustainable Delivery, because we know we cannot simply return to the way things worked before COVID. We must reform and adapt how the NHS provides care, principally for the benefit of patients, but also to better reflect and take advantage of new technology and modern ways of working. With our ageing population and the backlog of care caused by COVID, we need to increase the capacity of the NHS across primary, community and acute sectors, and also be much more innovative about how NHS capacity is utilised. Now, this is happening already in certain important ways. For example, the increased use of digital consultations is already saving many patients the trip to the doctor or the hospital and helping to speed up treatment. And a new approach to A&E means that only those who really need to go to hospital urgently will now be treated in our accident and emergency departments. But to ensure that we treat those whose treatment has been delayed as quickly as possible and maintain and improve day-to-day services on an ongoing basis, we must now modernise and improve how the NHS works in other areas too. Our plan has 3 clear priorities. Firstly, we will recognise, invest in and support the contribution of the magnificent NHS staff who care for us. That's why we have already given the NHS workforce a £500 thank you bonus. And it's why we are offering the biggest single increase in NHS pay in the history of devolution. That will mean, for example, that a nurse at the top of Band 5 of the Agenda for Change pay scale will be over £1,300 better off after tax than a counterpart in England. Our NHS workers are extraordinary people, and in this most extraordinary of times, this is a way of showing our collective appreciation. But it is also vitally important for the recruitment and the retention of NHS staff that we increase what we pay them. Given all that our NHS staff have endured over the past year, we also have a duty to look after their well-being. Partly this is about ensuring that the NHS as an employer acts fairly and with staff well-being at heart. For example, I know that over the past year, many staff postponed their own annual leave to make sure they were available to care for others. The NHS must ensure they get the chance to take that holiday entitlement as we move into the new financial year. Staff, particularly those who have been at the sharpest end of COVID, must get the time they need to recover. Secondly, our national NHS remobilisation plan will enable more people to get the right support closer to their own home. A real shift in the balance of care is required, from acute hospital settings to community and local services. This shift in the balance of care must be backed up by a shift in investment. So in the next Parliament, we will ensure that half of the total budget for frontline NHS services will be invested in community and primary care. This will allow us, for example, to invest in more nurse-led community treatment in GP practices and other community settings so that more people can be cared for much more conveniently and quickly. Just one example of many of the difference that can be made is in the treatment of glaucoma, an eye condition that can lead to loss of vision if it's not diagnosed and treated early. With people now living longer, this is a condition that increasing numbers of us will be diagnosed with in the years to come. With the right investments now, we estimate that in future, around 30,000 glaucoma patients could get the care they need in community settings rather than attending hospital as outpatients. Now, this is obviously better and more convenient for patients, but it will also free up hospital capacity. And that brings me to the third part of the NHS remobilisation plan, building new and maximising existing hospital capacity so that more patients can be treated more quickly. Our plan envisages that by 2025, an additional 1,500 staff will be recruited to work in the new national elective and diagnostic treatment centres that are being established across the country to carry out more planned operations. Like the fantastic Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank, these elective centres will be dedicated to delivering planned care only, rather than the mix of emergency and planned treatment that is carried out in most of our existing hospitals. These centres will specialise in procedures like hip and knee replacements, cataract surgery, and diagnostic services like MRI scans. We have already expanded the original elective centre at the Golden Jubilee. A further 6 new elective centres are already in development, and we will also renew the Edinburgh Eye Pavilion. But today I can announce that in light of the backlog created by COVID, we will establish, if re-elected, 2 more elective treatment centres, one in Ayrshire and another in Cumbernauld. This will mean a national network of 10 elective and diagnostic centres across our country.
And if you want to catch the rest of Nicola Sturgeon's speech, we'll be playing it at the end of the programme. Danish, I suspect that the NHS is going to be the focus for most of the parties in the upcoming election. That's quite a wide-ranging menu of options that Nicola Sturgeon has laid out today. Do you think it's the right focus, focusing on these elective surgery initiatives?
Yeah, so I think we need to begin by actually thanking all of our NHS staff that the stellar work and shift that they've put in over the last year or so, going into work every single day, dealing with the ICU and people who have fallen sick with COVID, and sadly many who have died from it. Um, I think the NHS is the right focus. I think Nicola Sturgeon has shown today continuously, in fact, her focus on recovery of the job at hand and the huge job at hand to actually recover from COVID and have the country recover from COVID, not only in the NHS, but in other areas as well. I think with this promise of 1,500 staff to be recruited by 2025 is a huge ambition. And I think achieving that is going to be bringing Scotland further ahead, because we are already, remember, the most well-funded NHS anywhere in the United Kingdom. And I think this is going to put us the full miles ahead of the rest of the union. The fantastic news for me, being from Cumbernauld and one of the list candidates for the central region, is that Cumbernauld is actually where I reside, and to have one of these elective centres here would be fantastic. As an optician, I know the importance of glaucoma screening and glaucoma treatment, and I've long said within my own profession that we could save the NHS millions by having opticians and a network of community health professionals doing these checkups and treatment check-ins with patients that don't necessarily need to be at the hospital, which is an inconvenience for patients and is a cost involved with that as well in terms of travel. So I think it's the right direction. I think the Scottish people will see that come the 6th of May when they both vote SNP and return Nicola Sturgeon as the First Minister. It's up to the Scottish people to do that come May.
2025 is another 4 years away. I mean, it's almost run up to yet another general election. It's what she's saying. It's going to take another 4 years to make sure that all these elective options are up and running fully. I don't know where we are with the ones under development. Do you have any sense of the time scale for these coming on stream?
Yeah, so the centres that have been getting built and being put together, these are very big, ambitious projects. And so you could say, in fact, that we're going to be held up to the standard if we're taking it right to 2025, because it'll be very obvious at that stage whether those things have been met or not. So I think it's actually Nicola Sturgeon treating the electorate as adults and saying, you know what, it's a big ambition and it's going to take this length of time. But as I say, we are already the best funded.
But one of the things that
Mhm.
people are worried about is the backlog in treatment, and the fact that people haven't necessarily been diagnosed, and there could be a massive, um, uh, really serious incidence on Scotland's health as a result of that.
And we're
I
not
was just
shying away
wondering.
from that. Mhm.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, you're right. And with the advent of COVID, that's obviously set us back. But what we're doing is we're taking it face on and saying, there's an issue. This is our solution to it. We're going to establish these centres, get them going, and this is the timescale we anticipate. And we're putting it out there in black and white, and the electorate can judge us on that.
Mental health has been picked up by some other parties in the last week or two. There wasn't anything I don't catch in that part of the speech about mental health. Kat, do you think that there needs to be a bigger focus on helping people with mental health issues, because that's got hugely worse as a result of COVID?
Yeah, I think just off the
That
top
was
of my
a
head, I
question
think,
for Kat. Sorry,
oh,
Danish.
sorry.
Kat.
It's no problem. I'm actually learning a lot listening to you speak. I do think that the waiting list for mental health for the NHS were already long before the pandemic. It already took about 2 years to see a specialist for, psychology or something like that. So I think that it really does. It's really going to be necessary, and I think maybe they will be able to gauge how many people we need to just because there's going to be an increase of people, and a lot of times mental health can be acute and it can be um, very treatable, but it's very important to get the timing on it down. So I can't help but think that there needs to be a some maybe more roles, something to make it so that there's less of a waiting time.
I mean, obviously, the key to that is an increased level of staffing. And we've heard that there's going to be 1,500 new people recruited. Because you can't just create doctors and nurses overnight. It takes a long time. We've got the added pressure of a number of health workers deciding to quit the NHS as a result of the immense pressures they've been under COVID, and you really can't blame them. Plus the added pressure that quite a lot of overseas medical professionals are either have gone back to Europe because of Brexit or are thinking about it. So I'm really concerned of where these new staff are going to come from. We almost needed to start recruiting 5 years ago before the pandemic. So I think that does concern me. Are you not worried about that, Danish?
So you're right to say it does take a number of years to get people through the sort of the pipeline. But with regards to mental health specifically, just to come on to the point that you mentioned, we have upped our numbers by around 70% since we've been in power, and doubled the amount of resources given doubled the number of child psychology posts in the last 10 years in the health service. So, our mental health record is strong, but we have a long way to go. And again, with COVID, these things have increased. I think we've all felt the tinge of mental health and how that can affect us being at home. And again, we have the first dedicated Minister for Mental Health in the UK, showing that it's a priority for government. And again, that was before COVID as well, to show that this is a priority for the SNP.
Okay. Kat, the First Minister mentioned the pay rise that's been offered at 4.5%. It's way ahead of what's been offered in England. And yet some of the unions are rejecting it and saying it needs to be nearer 12%. Is that fair, or is that totally unreasonable?
I don't think it's unreasonable. I think that the unions are doing right by their members, and I do think that there should be a higher pay rise. I just don't know if that's really in the realm of possibility. So I do think that this might be something that's normal in the negotiations, and hopefully they get to an agreement. I don't know if there's any more room than the 4% offered, but I think it is important for the unions to also continue to advocate for more for their people.
I think it's interesting, and I think had that offer been made at normal times, that would have been a high offer for the public sector. Had the unions come back and said 12%, the public would have said, oh, come on, you're joking. But actually, like you, people are so in debt to nurses and doctors and other medical professionals, there might well be a bit of public sympathy for that. And it might be that there is going to have to be more money found. Danish, is that possible, do you think? Is the offer the final offer, or is there wiggle room?
I'll steer clear of making promises on the government's behalf, but from my perspective, I think the 4%, I think anyone can see the importance that Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government have given to the NHS compared to the 1% insult that was offered south of the border, especially after all the clapping and all the, talk is cheap, I suppose, to some extent when it comes to these types of things, offering the 1% after everything that's happened from Boris Johnson, frankly, an insult. I think the 4% shows really how the Scottish Government feel about the NHS 4 times more than their counterparts. And I think I'd encourage them to take it. With regards to borrowing that you mentioned and to find more money, in an independent Scotland, we would have those levers, financial levers to do so. As we are at the minute in the union, it's difficult to see where we can pull that money from and meet all the other objectives and sort of promises that we've made and be fair across the board.
Well, true, it's 4 times better than England, but it's not about comparing ourselves with what we're doing in England. It's about setting our own agenda. So we'll see just how much the public got on side with that. Elsewhere in the election, the Greens have been focusing on the justice system. The Scottish Greens today pledged to enshrine anonymity for victims of sexual offences in law and make legal aid available to all domestic abuse victims. Unlike other UK nations, there is no general prohibition on identifying sexual offence complainers in Scotland. Instead, there is an understanding to maintain anonymity between mainstream media outlets. Meanwhile, under the current system, victims of domestic abuse are given additional measures of support in criminal cases, but women and children who experience domestic abuse are not eligible for legal aid in civil cases. Commenting, Scottish Green co-leader Patrick Harvey said, "The Scottish Greens believe victims of sexual violence must be given the legal right to anonymity. We don't believe the current setup, where publishers adhere to a voluntary code, is suitable for the digital age." Mr. Harvey said that far too many women and children experience domestic abuse in Scotland, and they lacked access to justice because they are not eligible for civil legal aid, and that this needs to change so that women who experience violence at home can get the legal help they need. Kat, he's not wrong, is he?
No, he's not wrong. But I do think that even though anonymity is important, and I think the events of the last few years just showed how important it is to protect survivors who have come forward from public backlash. I do think that's important, but I do think that there's some other things that need to be addressed that might be a little bit more urgent than that, like the corroboration rules, things like that. So while I think that this is a great step and it's great, like a great gesture on the Greens, I would like to see something more in substantive of, how to make criminal cases more realistic in being able to convict people, because 2 corroborators for sexual assault cases is kind of an impossible ask when it.
Well,
when it
absolutely. And
comes to-
apart from Portugal, Scotland is the only country that asked for corroboration. It's interesting, isn't it? It's not often in an election that issues about reforming the justice system are kind of headlines. It's not something that's normally seen as a voter issue. And yet, you're right, corroboration is being discussed. Just today, the possibility that the not proven verdict, the third verdict in Scots law, which is unique to Scotland, might go. So, Danish, why do you think there's such a focus on the justice system?
I think the focus on the justice system actually comes down to our Justice Minister Hamza Yousaf making it accessible and understandable for the public, and modernising the justice system for a modern, forward-looking Scotland. I think looking at the not proven verdict is actually quite in line with what most people in the public would see fit for our criminal justice system, for it to be clear about how the verdict is delivered. With regards to the Greens pledge, and to put the anonymity for sexual offences victims into law, I think that's in the right direction. And my feeling is that the SNP will give a strong backing to that, a strong suggestion of backing that in the future. Because again, modernising the justice system so it serves the people of Scotland in a modern time. And what I mean by that is, with the advent of social media, previously these sort of unspoken rules might have been upheld between journalists and the professional networks that would perhaps deliver this news. Now, these days, anyone on Twitter, and we've seen that in recent events and recent cases where people have been pulled up for contempt of court for writing blogs and tweets and things of that nature. And, I think it's only right that we update these laws.
And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that there actually isn't legal protection for anonymity. And certainly I wasn't aware that victims of domestic abuse had no recourse to financial aid if it was a civil case. So you're right, these things need to change if we're serious about protecting women and girls. We're going to see a lot of polls during this election. There's a new one out today which puts SNP in lead with a very strong showing by the Greens. An Ipsos Mori poll for STV has put the SNP on 53% of the constituency vote, with the Conservatives on 20% and Labour on 18%. The SNP is polling at 38% on the list vote, Conservatives and Labour on 21% and 18% respectively. The poll has also shown that a majority of people in Scotland support independence, with 52% of people backing Scotland becoming independent. SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said, "This poll shows that there is absolutely no room for complacency. to ensure that Nicola Sturgeon is re-elected as First Minister and to allow the recovery to be made in Scotland, it has to be both votes SNP on May the 6th. The SNP is the only party in this election putting forward a serious plan for government, with Nicola Sturgeon determined to lead Scotland through the COVID-19 pandemic and into a national recovery. Scottish Greens co-leader Lorna Slater said, "This poll tells us that the Scottish Greens are set to have a record number of MSPs in Holyrood and could yet play a crucial role in securing a pro-independence majority in May. I'm also proud that if this poll turns into votes, we will have 8 women and 3 men as our Scottish Green MSPs." Kat, that's quite a bounce for the Greens. It's a bit more than I think even they were hoping for. I'm just wondering whether the strong showing of both Nicola Sturgeon and Lorna Slater in the recent leadership debate has filtered through to this poll. I'm also interested that more and more the Greens seem to be putting Lorna Slater up in the public, and I wonder if that's as a kind of foil to Nicola Sturgeon or whether it's because the Scottish public react well to female leaders. What do you think?
I think that I won't say that it's just because of Nicola Sturgeon. I think that Lorna Slater is fairly brilliant. I think that she's very skilled, and that's her leadership debate was very good. She talks a lot of sense and she talks well about it. But I will say, they do have Patrick Harvey, front and center a lot of the time as well. So I don't want to say that it's just as a foil to Nicola Sturgeon or anything like that, but I do think that it is well and good that she is, taking on more responsibilities in the spotlight and communications for the party. And,
But if these
I like
polls
her quite a
are
bit.
correct, it would look like the Greens are winning the battle for that second vote at the expense of, shall we say, some other parties. Do you think that suggestion of 11, possibly 12 seats is likely? That would give the supermajority, just not the supermajority that some people have been talking about.
Yeah, I fail to see, is supermajority supposed to mean 2/3 here? I know what, like, in the American context, a supermajority is a specific thing for a specific purpose, usually, and kind of like in the EU with qualified majority voting. Like, I hesitate to call anything super unless there's substantive things it can do differently. But I will say that I think that this speaks a lot about the people in Scotland, that when there's a new party that says, "Hey, vote for us for independence," we're not as far to the left. All of a sudden, the further to the left party is doing better. I think that really speaks to the progressive, outward-looking, inclusive independence movement. How open we are. I will say I would like to see regional breakdowns more for these polls because although I think that SNP 1 Green 2 is fine. You know what I mean? I'm a little bit, I always kind of thought that might be me, but the SNP list shouldn't just be taken as a normal thing. It's amazing. These reserve slots have been filled by the best and the brightest that we have. And I know in my region, I will be voting SNP because I want to put Graham Campbell in Holyrood.
Danish, are you one of the brightest and the best? Don't be shy now.
For the Central region, I'm quite pleased to be at the top of the list for the Central region, and Graham Campbell, who I know is a stellar candidate for Lothian as well. I commend him for getting the top of the list. I think the SNP we won't be taking anything for granted. I won't make the mistakes that other parties that have taken the votes in Scotland for granted have suffered that type of fate. So we are out, we are campaigning, we are leafleting, and we will earn every single vote. Despite having been in government for this long, we will continue to work for the people of Scotland and seek both votes SNP so that we can return a majority. With regards to this language around the so-called supermajority, I agree with Kat completely on that. There isn't a provision in Scots law or in our legislature that says it actually confers anything additional. A majority from the SNP would be a domestically and internationally recognised legitimacy, both legally as well. So I think that's what we're aiming for. I think for an independence referendum, it's an SNP majority that we need, not pro-Indy, not both votes yes. People are sort of, you're in a good position when the opposition are stealing your slogans. We've been running both votes SNP since the 2016 elections. I've got pens still sitting in stacks from then. And to have other parties, Labour and other new parties with spurious manifestos and patchy promises being made on what their policy is, I think it shows that we are doing a good job for Scotland to have the opposition stealing our words from us. But I will very much be doing both votes SNP and encourage everyone else to do so.
The Twitter sphere has become full of mathematical experts, endless number of posts working out how many people you should vote for, what it means, and it really depends on who you read, who you believe. The reality is a great number of the Scottish public don't really understand the voting system for the list in Scotland. It is quite a complex system. They may understand how to use it when they go into the ballot box, but they don't really understand how it calculates and turns into votes. And I'm wondering whether the SNP in particular shouldn't be doing more to say, look, in this area we need this percentage of the vote on the list in order to gain a seat, to make it really clear to people what needs to happen, rather than both votes SNP as a blanket message. Shouldn't it be a bit more targeted to individual regions? Because it does vary quite dramatically, doesn't it, Danish?
Well, this is the thing, though. I mean, myself, yourself, Kat, in the political sphere, we might debate the splitting hairs of these types of things, but for the average voter, if we take a very simple look, and it's not rocket science, it really isn't. It just takes a lot of looking at it. If we take the last Scottish Parliament elections, if everyone who had voted SNP on the first paper voted on the regional list for the SNP, we would have had a majority. But instead, what did we have? We lost list votes, which was crucial in making a majority, which lost us an element of, that's our majority legitimacy in asking for a Section 30, and has put us on the back foot. Now, the same people are saying once again that, try and game the system and try to be clever about it. It really isn't about all that. A simple approach of whoever's voting on the first one, SNP, votes SNP on the second one, lo and behold, you deliver a majority SNP government. It really is as simple as that, and the numbers are there. Anyone could look at them from the last election. People who try to say otherwise, like you said, these mathematical experts now that are popping up at the last minute, it's always very complex in these numbers and statistics, and it makes you seem as though someone's done the work so you don't have to, when in reality, it is fairly simple. If you do both votes SNP, there will be a SNP majority government.
Well, I don't suppose it will stop the Twitter sphere continue to debate this right up until the polls close on May the 6th.
I don't suppose it will.
Elsewhere, Alex Salmond has been accused of spinning Russian propaganda. In a BBC Scotland interview, former First Minister was asked 3 times whether Russia was behind the Novichok poisoning attacks on Sergei and Yulia Skripal, and each time he refused to give a yes or no answer. Mr. Salmond implied that it was unclear who was to blame, saying that evidence came forward and was contested, that I said should go to the international tribunals and courts. I said that at the time. I think the evidence came forward and people can see it for what it is. Stuart MacDonald, MP, the SNP Shadow Defence Secretary, criticised Alex Salmond's response, saying that even Russians believe that Russia was behind the Salisbury poisoning that resulted in the murder of Don Sturgis. Mr. Salmond also denied that Russia had interfered in the 2014 Scottish independence referendum and downplayed the Russian interference in the 2016 US elections. This is despite the fact that the US intelligence agencies and congressional committees found that Russian agents and proxies interfered heavily in the 2016 US elections and were implicated in the leak of private Democratic Party documents. I'm guessing, Kat, he would say that, wouldn't he? Or rather, he wouldn't say that because he didn't really say very much. What do you make of his response?
So he has a show on Russia Today. So I guess the only surprising thing for me is that anyone else was surprised by this, or if that people still think that he really cares about Scotland and independence and that's why he's doing this. I mean, follow the money. If it quacks like a duck, it's usually a duck.
Okay, well, we're not suggesting there's any Russian money involved. We need to be clear about that. Do you think this is his TV program coming back to bite him, Danish?
Yeah, so I think for me, it raised more questions than answers, and I think he really showed himself up there. I think for someone who's asking for a second bite at the cherry to have the Scottish public, who are very discerning voters, um, give him his take their trust, and he's being accused of gaming the system in Scotland on the list system, only running on a list system coming through the back door at the last minute. To not then condemn the type of democracy that we all know exists in Russia, to not condemn acts that look strongly have been carried out by state-sponsored actions. I think that's quite a precarious position to be in for someone who's asking to be democratically elected and stand as a representative of Scottish people, both here and abroad.
Well, maybe
I
he's just
think,
trying to keep the door to his day job open in case it doesn't work out for him in the
well, in
Northeast.
which case it shows where the priority is, isn't it? The priority is
indeed.
not for the Scottish people and their representation and our international integrity, is it? So I think that raises the question there about integrity again.
Okay. Going over to Northern Ireland, where there's been a lot of trouble in the last few days. Northern Ireland's Justice Minister has said that the UK government's dishonesty over the consequences of a hard Brexit has contributed to the anger felt by loyalists as police counted the cost of 41 officers injured during violence on the streets over 4 nights. Alliance Party leader Naomi Long's remarks came as tensions escalated in Northern Ireland, with the First Minister and the Democratic Unionist Party leader Arlene Foster hitting out at the arrogance of Sinn Féin and telling the BBC the IRA Army Council still existed. Long attributed the violence to a combination of loyalist protests over police success in cracking down on paramilitary gangs and disquiet, she says, has been stoked by Westminster leaders' false rhetoric over Brexit. In a swipe at both Boris Johnson, who claimed there would be no checks on goods crossing the Irish Sea, and the Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis, who said no border would be erected following Brexit, she said the government knew Brexit would be felt most acutely in Northern Ireland, where identity issues are tied up with border issues. Kat, we saw this coming. They were warned that this was likely to cause the kind of violence that we've seen over the last few nights that really could escalate again. Is anyone surprised at what's happened?
I'm not surprised, but I might be shocked at the reality of it, but yeah, I'm not surprised that this is happening. And I'm really concerned about how it's being handled, not just what happened and the violence, but now the lines that are being given to us from out of Stormont and all that. It's really concerning that this might not be a one-off. It kind of reminds me of like the Capitol insurrection, how they said, is this going to be a one-off or is this the start of something? That's kind of what I'm wondering right now. Is this the start of something?
I think
And,
Arlene Foster.
I don't see.
I think Arlene Foster's response was very interesting. I mean, it was her chance to, be honest and say, look, we warned you this would happen, and she did. She tried to warn Boris Johnson that this would cause trouble, and instead, she just changes the narrative completely and starts shouting about IRA council still being in existence and the arrogance of Sinn Féin. No mention at all about what Brexit is doing to her party. Danish, there's a real feeling, a growing feeling in some parts of the unionist community in Northern Ireland that they care more about the union than the union cares about them. And that's turning a lot of soft unionists, if not into people who want a united Ireland, people who are less concerned about that as a prospect. Do you think all of this is making the possibility of a united Ireland that much closer?
Yeah, the scenes we've seen in Northern Ireland is extremely sad to see. It stemmed from the lies told by lies told to the Northern Irish people from Boris Johnson throughout the Brexit negotiations, along with the rest of us, frankly. Something that we've become far too accustomed to see. It's now looking like it's going to be affecting the unity of Ireland and the people there. I think with Boris Johnson, it's interesting to look at it, Maggie, that where the integrity and the bar has gone to now. We're now well past post-truth politics. We're well past, people standing down from ministerial positions due to out and out, let's say, lies. We won't go so far to say corruption, but many might say that in terms of PPE contracts and things like that. How low will the bar go for the people of the union before they realise it's really not working? And that's why we in the SNP always say that, in an independent Scotland, we can do things differently. We can raise that bar of integrity and raise the way we're doing things by electing a Scottish Parliament again. And this is just one more casualty of Boris Johnson's lies. He's been sacked by the Times in 1988, and nothing seems to have changed since then in terms of his lies. We all know about the personal side of things with affairs and all this kind of thing ongoing, which we won't get into. But it's not the kind of man that you're surprised that lies. Yet he's occupying the highest office in the country. I don't know what else we should expect. At least in Scotland, we have an alternative that we can take to get out of the union and do things in a better way and
What
join our European
do you
friends
think
again.
it's making a united Ireland more likely?
I think that's a question for the Irish to answer, really. It may well be making it more likely, and it may well, what it is doing, I feel, is actually bringing the demise of the union, something which Boris Johnson would abhor, actually closer through his own actions and inactions and incompetencies. So I think actually goes to show his priority is himself and his friends and money, rather than the union which he professes to try and protect.
Yeah. Um, Back to something a bit more local. Well, not local to Scotland, but local in the UK. There have been arrests made in London today over Extinction Rebellion's attacks on Barclays London HQ. 7 people outside the London headquarters after there was a protest involving broken windows to protest the role of the financial sector in climate change. The activists from the Extinction Rebellion group used hammers to break the windows and then pasted the message, "In case of climate emergency, break glass," on the front of the bank's building. The group said the action was part of its money rebellion against the capitalist system, which used non-violent direct action, causing damage to property to prevent and draw attention to greater damage. It accused the bank of continued investments in activities that are directly contributing to the climate and ecological emergency. Extinction Rebellion are entitled to their view on capitalism and climate change, but we would ask that in expressing that view, they stop short of behaviour which involves criminal damage to our facilities and puts people's safety at risk, a spokesman for Barclays said. It's not clear how many, if any, people were in the headquarter building when this attack took place. Kat, it feels kind of old-fashioned in a way, that kind of non-violent, well, it is violent, you can't really say it's non-violent, breaking windows, and, against the capitalist system. This is the kind of thing I grew up with in the 70s. It's almost quite refreshing to see some action being taken and things to grab attention. But is it just all a stunt? Does it have any real purpose behind it?
I mean, I do think that the press in the UK is very temperamental, and when I see this and I see people going, "Oh, we don't need that," or calling this a violent protest when we all saw what the police were doing, to peaceful protesters, to call this violence seems kind of like a slap in the face, honestly. Um, I, you know, Sometimes I feel a little bit jealous of people that can practice a little civil disobedience for their cause because I'm on a visa, so I can't do anything like that. So I would encourage everyone to follow the law and to not break the law. But I do think that is it a stunt when you're trying to draw attention to something? I mean, they are doing what they set out to do. if you look, they said we want these specific things. They attacked Barclays because of the gambling stuff, about many different things. Is it the most useful way to do something? I don't know, but I do think that there's a place for it.
Extinction Rebellion are very good at grabbing headlines. They're very good at doing things that literally bring city centres to a standstill. They had a massive boat in the centre of Glasgow not that long ago that held up traffic. But I'm just worried that sometimes activities like that maybe detract from the serious environmental message that needs to get out there. And that's what I mean about it being a stunt. I mean, you wouldn't recommend people behaving like that in pursuit of Scottish independence, would you, Danish?
No, I wouldn't. I think with regards to Extinction Rebellion, I think they've got a right to protest. I believe in that right to protest, though I think we need to remain very much on the side of the non-violence of it. Harming private property, harming property of others, I think that needs to be well and away from protest. I think actually detracts from the message that they're trying to raise, although it brings up the press scale, and we end up speaking about it as we are tonight because of the actions that they've taken. I think it does a little bit of an injustice to what happens. The other thing is, I would say actually, I believe as firmly as Kat was saying, firmly the law ends up being applied to protesters, violent or otherwise, as we've seen not too long ago with the disappearance of Seva Evergard. I would like to see the law applied as firmly when it came to financial indiscretions, when it comes to things that have been in the murky world of the finance in the city. Do we have as tight a grip on that, or is that just sort of waved through? Do we have the teams that are working on these things as far as with as firm a hand that we deal with protesters who are exercising their democratic right? So I think that's what I would point the finger at.
Well, there's lots to point the finger at bankers, that's for sure. But environmental issues have been in the news internationally as well. The Inuit Party has won the Greenland election. It's a left-wing party. It's pledged its opposition to a large rare earth mining project after winning a parliamentary election with more than a third of the votes. The result of Tuesday's election casts doubt on the mining complex at Cavenfield in the south of the Arctic island and sends a strong signal to international mining companies wanting to exploit Greenland's vast untapped mineral resources. The Inuit Party won 37% of votes compared to 26% in the last election, overtaking the ruling Social Democrat Sumut Party, who've been in power pretty much continuously since 1979. Though the IA is not opposed outright to mining, it has a strong environmental focus, and its campaign to halt the Cavenfield project, which aside from rare minerals including neodymium, which is used in wind turbines, electric vehicles and combat aircraft, also contains uranium. Now, it's easy to think Greenland, far away from everywhere, 56,000 people, not particularly important. But the Inuit Party, the IA, are also a separatist party. They're wanting to push for independence from Denmark. And yet this mine, which is so rich in minerals, one of the most mineral-rich parts of the world, could make Greenland an extremely wealthy country. So you'd think it might be sensible to continue to promote the mine in the hope that it pushes for Danish independence. So, is there more to this election win than just a squabble over mining, Danish?
So you may be able to take a guess at my views on the right to self-determination, but without knowing all the details of Greenland and Denmark's union. I think it will show that the people of Greenland are making their voice heard in a democratic way. If they've won the vote by 30%, with 30% of the parliament in the I think that's a step in the direction if they want to move for independence. In the end, it's a decision for the people of Greenland. As I said, without knowing the details, I couldn't comment too much on that. But if they're going about it in a democratic way through the parliamentary process, which is what we're encouraging here in Scotland, vote for the people that you want to express your views for, who you want to represent you. and we can deliver for that as we do in the SNP here.
But there is more to it, Kat, isn't there? Greenland isn't just this remote place where 56,000 people live. It's a tremendously strategic island, isn't it?
Yeah, everybody wants a piece of Greenland because of climate change and because of its location, because the Arctic Circle, you know, shipping lanes that are, I don't even know if they're open yet through there. And I say yet, that's a horrible thing. But due to climate change, it's going to become much more relevant. Everything I've read about this, now I don't know if this is to how the press is reporting it or to the actual like gist of what's happening, is that they campaign on environmental justice. They campaigned on not having that mine go. So I think that what we can really draw from that is that the people of Greenland spoke and they said how much the climate matters to them. I don't know how strong or weak their independence was in their manifesto or what that's polling at, but I do know that it seems like the not having that mine open and the environment came front and center. While that will not enrich Greenland's people, or it might not forward their case for independence, you can really see what the people there care for or care about, and they care about the future.
It's interesting that mining is becoming more likely in Greenland because of climate change, and as the ice melts, it's making mining more feasible and possible. At the moment, the mine is owned by an Australian conglomerate that is backed by the Chinese, and there are people who are saying we really, really want to take the Chinese out of this. At the moment, the Chinese are in control of some of the world's wealthiest minerals, and this, if this mine was to go ahead or be managed by other people, possibly the Americans, the Russians are showing some interest. Maybe it would put the Chinese in a less successful position in terms of controlling the world's mineral wealth. So it is strategic in that way, but it's also strategic in a defence issue. Am I not right, Kat, in thinking that Donald Trump wanted to buy Greenland at one point?
Yes, he, among many other silly things he said, I think that we were talking right before the show. I think that probably that was in a briefing about how important Greenland was strategically to America. And I think that he said that quiet part out loud and just kind of telegraphed it to all of us when he wasn't quite supposed to. But yeah, Greenland is really, really important strategically in like the global politics, global defense, diplomacy, all of that because of where it is and because of climate change.
Yeah, and so people shouldn't just dismiss it as a small place with a few thousand people living on it. Actually, there's more to that. And it is interesting that the media are only really playing up the mining element and not anything about the self-determination. Surprise, surprise. It's an autonomous territory of Denmark. Denmark do subsidise the economy very heavily. And they've been pretty quiet, I think, on the result of that election. But we'll see. Greenland, not to be ignored. Closer to home, talk about being up a creek without a paddle. Well, that actually happened. A kayaker who is believed to have travelled from England to Scotland in breach of coronavirus rules had to be rescued after being stuck on a Loch Lomond island. After a walk around the island yesterday afternoon, he found his kayak's paddle missing on his return, and he called the police. Loch Lomond rescue boat said it was contacted by the police, and they went to the island and landed the man ashore at Luss. In a Facebook post, Loch Lomond rescue boat said the rescue boat was launched and located the person on the island and safely transferred him and his equipment over to his car and then stood down. The person had travelled from England to camp on the island for Easter weekend. Please could we remind all to stick to the COVID rules and keep people safe. Danish, should he be forced to pay for the rescue costs to get him off that island? I mean, I don't know what they were, but it must have cost petrol or something.
Yeah, no, it would have cost time, money, effort from the great rescue teams that we have in that area. Whether you should pay the bill, I don't know. I think people just need to be more sensible with it. I mean, it's the last resort, the rescue teams, and people make mistakes, and that's where it's supposed to be. But this seems like a concerted effort to get from here, from England. And I can't blame him for the way it's being run by Boris Johnson in England to get away and make it up to Loch Lomond. get away from humanity for a bit. But it's we need to be sensible about these things, and I think it's a little selfish to me to be doing that and putting other people out and potentially other people at risk that might need a proper rescue. So yeah, I think we should all follow the COVID guidelines and stick to it a bit closer. We're at the end of the tunnel now. We can't quite let go of the regulations now. We just need to see it through to the end.
Well, the mystery is what happened to the paddle. I don't know, but the island he was on, I don't know if it's inhabited. It might even be the one where the wallabies are on. Maybe the wallabies stole his paddle. It's not clear.
It's
We don't
possible.
know whether he's been escorted to the border and told to go home. But I hope he had a nice weekend in Scotland. The weather was reasonable. Interesting there, you mentioned that Danish, that we were down the end of the tunnel. Well, in June, there's going to be footballers coming down the tunnel at Hampden, and there will be now 12,000 spectators per game allowed to be there. So the First Minister has confirmed fans will return to Hampden for Euro 2020. Responding to the news that fans will be able to cheer on Scotland at Hampden Park in June, Nicola Sturgeon said she's delighted to be able to confirm that thanks to Scotland's progress in suppressing COVID-19, 12,000 spectators will be able to attend Hampden for the 4 Euro 2020 games this summer. The First Minister said that this is a significant moment which celebrates just how far Scotland has come in tackling the COVID pandemic. Allowing fans to come together to watch Scotland play at the National Stadium is a huge milestone, thanks to the dedication of fans sticking to public health guidance. The restrictions set out over the last year have been really difficult for everyone, but I am looking forward to joining the Tartan Army in cheering on Scotland in June at Hampden Park, adding, the country has delivered for the fans, now it's all eyes on the team to deliver the results. Well, we'll see. So, there are 4 games planned for Hampden. Not all of them will involve Scotland. I'm assuming, Danish, that this is 12,000 Scottish fans. There won't be fans from either Croatia or the Czech Republic who are the other teams playing. Is that correct?
So I'm assuming it will be, because I think I'm inviting fans from abroad. The First Minister's already indicated that international travel is probably going to be lowered in the list on allowing things. I think it will be, as we have done throughout. Nicola Sturgeon's always been very safe about these things, as we should be, taking the virus very seriously. So to have 12,000 fans, it'll be with social distance, but allowing you to be there in the atmosphere at least, and partake in the game and that kind of thing. And with everyone vaccinated, and we've obviously worked out how we can do that safely, we would not be promising this if it were to have any chance to sort of raise numbers in a way that would put people's lives at risk, or pushing up the numbers in ICU units across the country for the sake of football. And I think the First Minister's made that clear as well around some of the other football games that have happened, that look, at the end of the day, it's a football game, and we need to view that in perspective with everything else. That being said, I'm very much looking forward to cheering on the national side as well. It'll be a good treat after all this hard work and obeying the regulations. It'll be nice to actually cheer Scotland on a Euro or national stage.
Well, it's the first appearance in the Euro Championship since 1998, so there's a lot riding on it. But yeah, I must admit I'm not a huge football fan, but my feeling is, football, I'd rather that we were getting some confirmation that the Edinburgh Festival was going to happen to the same extent, or the Edinburgh Fringe was going to happen, or that our theatres could open again. That would excite me more. Given that the football industry has not behaved well during COVID, the number of teams across the UK and the number of players who've been fined and have breached COVID rules, and we know about the bad behaviour of certain fans from certain football clubs in this city itself. So, Kat, what did you think? Right decision, or pandering to our national obsession with football that we're not very good at?
I think that whatever can be introduced that helps enough people, that gives us something to cheer for, to cheer about. Football would not be my choice either. I do look forward to hearing about what the Fringe will look like this summer, because another year without the Fringe just makes Edinburgh seem pretty strange, actually, all summer long. I would, but if this signals like a return to normalcy, if this signals an end to the worst of the pandemic, then I say bring it on.
Okay, well, maybe this will give the Scottish team thought, and they'll try harder and maybe replicate the successes that those Scottish rugby players did so far in the Six Nations, who did jolly well, and they didn't have any fans cheering them on. That's the end of the programme tonight. We've covered all the stories. Thank to both of my guests for participating. As usual, we always make the plea that it costs money to make these programmes, and we would like you very much to consider supporting Broadcasting Scotland if you care about independent journalism. Go to the website www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register to see how you can contribute and help us continue to make programmes of quality. We have a big job ahead of us over the next few weeks, covering the election, and hopefully a bigger job to come, covering the run-up to the next independence referendum. Remember, as I said, if you want to see the rest of Nicola Sturgeon's speech that we opened the programme with, we'll be showing it at the end of this. It just lies to me again to thank my guests and to wish you all a good evening. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for having us.
Today I want to speak to you about Scotland's National Health Service. Like so many of you, the COVID crisis has caused me to reflect on what I value most in life. It has also reinforced for me the fact that politics must be about making a positive difference to people's lives. That is all that really matters. Over the past year, I know you won't have agreed with every decision that I and the SNP government have taken. And we certainly haven't got every decision absolutely right. But we have given total commitment to the task of keeping Scotland as safe as possible, of saving lives, protecting health and safeguarding our NHS. And that remains my overriding duty. Getting us through this pandemic is my priority in all circumstances, including during this election campaign. Of course, that does not mean this election is in any way less important. In fact, given the times we are living in and the crucial nature of the choice before Scotland, the election could not be any more important. In just 4 weeks' time, the people of Scotland will decide who should be First Minister and which party should form the next government. In this election, I am asking you to re-elect me as First Minister. First and foremost, because strong and experienced leadership is vital for these serious times, both now and for the months and years ahead. And I am asking you to re-elect an SNP government which has the seriousness of purpose to lead our country through crisis and drive forward our recovery. Indeed, what has become clear already during this election campaign is that the SNP is the only party with a serious and comprehensive plan for government and for our national recovery from COVID. It is a plan to build a fairer, more equal country, grounded in a sense of solidarity where we all look out for one another. We are the only party putting in the detailed thinking and the hard work needed to bring about a better future. At the very heart of our plan is the National Health Service. As First Minister, I do have a solemn duty to the people of Scotland to keep our country safe. But I also have a duty to protect our NHS and those who work in it, just as they have protected all of us. There are already 21,500 more people working in our NHS than when the SNP took office. Indeed, NHS staff numbers in Scotland are now at record levels. Patient satisfaction also continues to be high. Before the pandemic, we were making real progress with our 3-year £850 million plan to bring down waiting times. And Scotland's core A&E services were the best performing anywhere in the UK. In the last year, we've asked more of our NHS than ever before, and more than we could ever have expected. Nurses, paramedics, doctors, pharmacists, cleaners, porters, everyone who works in the health service have responded magnificently. It was essential to put our NHS on an emergency footing to cope with the virus. And of course, COVID is not yet over. Sadly, patients continue to be admitted to hospital and intensive care units. People tragically are still losing their lives. So we must not lower our guard. But as we see the incredible success of the vaccine programme, as well as the sacrifice of people across Scotland in suppressing case numbers, we can be more optimistic that better times now lie ahead. And that means it is now time to step up our efforts to get our NHS back to normal, to tackle the consequences of COVID for those who work in our health service and for those who rely on it for care and treatment. This will take time, investment and hard work, which is why it needs a solid plan. Next week, our manifesto will set out the levels of investment we intend to commit to our NHS and social care services over the next term of Parliament. However, I can confirm today that should we be re-elected, the SNP will deliver and implement a plan for the full-scale post-pandemic remobilisation of our NHS. Central to this plan will be a commitment to increase within the first year of the new Parliament inpatient, day case and outpatient treatment activity by 10% compared to pre-pandemic activity levels, and then to maintain that level for the rest of the term. This plan is already well developed and in the early stages of deployment. Today I will set out more details of our approach and just some of the actions we will take as we remobilise the NHS for the future. Crucial to our efforts will be the new NHS Centre for Sustainable Delivery, because we know we cannot simply return to the way things worked before COVID. We must reform and adapt how the NHS provides care, principally for the benefit of patients, but also to better reflect and take advantage of new technology and modern ways of working. With our ageing population and the backlog of care caused by COVID, we need to increase the capacity of the NHS across primary, community and acute sectors, and also be much more innovative about how NHS capacity is utilised. Now, this is happening already in certain important ways. For example, the increased use of digital consultations is already saving many patients the trip to the doctor or the hospital and helping to speed up treatment. And a new approach to A&E means that only those who really need to go to hospital urgently will now be treated in our accident and emergency departments. But to ensure that we treat those whose treatment has been delayed as quickly as possible and maintain and improve day-to-day services on an ongoing basis, we must now modernise and improve how the NHS works in other areas too. Our plan has 3 clear priorities. Firstly, we will recognise, invest in and support the contribution of the magnificent NHS staff who care for us. That's why we have already given the NHS workforce a £500 thank you bonus. And it's why we are offering the biggest single increase in NHS pay in the history of devolution. That will mean, for example, that a nurse at the top of Band 5 of the Agenda for Change pay scale will be over £1,300 better off after tax than a counterpart in England. Our NHS workers are extraordinary people, and in this most extraordinary of times, this is a way of showing our collective appreciation. But it is also vitally important for the recruitment and the retention of NHS staff that we increase what we pay them. Given all that our NHS staff have endured over the past year, we also have a duty to look after their well-being. Partly this is about ensuring that the NHS as an employer acts fairly and with staff well-being at heart. For example, I know that over the past year, many staff postponed their own annual leave to make sure they were available to care for others. The NHS must ensure they get the chance to take that holiday entitlement as we move into the new financial year. Staff, particularly those who have been at the sharpest end of COVID, must get the time they need to recover. Secondly, our national NHS remobilisation plan will enable more people to get the right support closer to their own home. A real shift in the balance of care is required, from acute hospital settings to community and local services. This shift in the balance of care must be backed up by a shift in investment. So in the next Parliament, we will ensure that half of the total budget for frontline NHS services will be invested in community and primary care. This will allow us, for example, to invest in more nurse-led community treatment in GP practices and other community settings, so that more people can be cared for much more conveniently and quickly. Just one example of many of the difference that can be made is in the treatment of glaucoma, an eye condition that can lead to loss of vision if it's not diagnosed and treated early. With people now living longer, this is a condition that increasing numbers of us will be diagnosed with in the years to come. With the right investments now, we estimate that in future, around 30,000 glaucoma patients could get the care they need in community settings rather than attending hospital as outpatients. Now, this is obviously better and more convenient for patients, but it will also free up hospital capacity. And that brings me to the third part of the NHS remobilisation plan, building new and maximising existing hospital capacity so that more patients can be treated more quickly. Our plan envisages that by 2025, an additional 1,500 staff will be recruited to work in the new national elective and diagnostic treatment centres that are being established across the country to carry out more planned operations. Like the fantastic Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank, these elective centres will be dedicated to delivering planned care only, rather than the mix of emergency and planned treatment that is carried out in most of our existing hospitals. These centres will specialise in procedures like hip and knee replacements, cataract surgery, and diagnostic services like MRI scans. We have already expanded the original elective centre at the Golden Jubilee. A further 6 new elective centres are already in development, and we will also renew the Edinburgh Eye Pavilion. But today I can announce that in light of the backlog created by COVID, we will establish, if re-elected, 2 more elective treatment centres, one in Ayrshire and another in Cumbernauld. This will mean a national network of 10 elective and diagnostic centres across our country. This will significantly increase NHS capacity, but crucially, delivering elective care in this way will also reduce the chance of last-minute delays because treatment will not have to be paused for emergencies. This expansion of elective capacity will be vital, but of course it will take time for all of it to be fully operational. So to increase capacity in the meantime, while these projects are completed, we intend to invest in shorter-term capacity. We will utilise mobile operating theatre units at a number of NHS sites, and we will bring on stream underused theatre capacity in community and general hospitals so that they can treat more patients as day cases. One of the places where this will happen is East Lothian Community Hospital in Haddington. Now, having increased surgical capacity means we will need to increase the number of available intensive care beds, so we plan to expand our normal pre-COVID ICU capacity from 175 beds to at least 200. And lastly, in terms of the detail I am setting out today, we will invest in a new network of fast-track cancer diagnostic centres. The first 3 of these in Fife, Ayrshire and Arran and Dumfries and Galloway will be operational by the end of May. We will also significantly expand community mental health services. Investment in and reform of mental health services, especially for children and young people, was already a priority pre-pandemic. The stress and trauma of COVID, though, has made that even more necessary and urgent. The ambition we are setting out in the remobilisation plan is bold, but also achievable. It is a plan to recover from the pandemic, remobilise our NHS and tackle the treatment backlog, and put the NHS on a secure and sustainable footing for the long term. I believe that working with our NHS staff, local communities, patient groups and trade unions, we can make sure people get the treatment they need and that we can get Scotland's NHS not just back to where it was, but ready to serve the people of Scotland long into the future. These are the SNP's plans. We can, of course, only put these into practice if we are re-elected to government. So I'm asking you at this election not to take any chances with our National Health Service. The only way to ensure the re-election of an SNP government providing the experienced leadership the country needs in these most serious of times, is to give both votes to the SNP on 6th May. We have the track record, the experience, and an unwavering and absolute commitment to a publicly owned National Health Service that delivers care free at the point of use. The last year has taught us never to take the NHS for granted. We need to value it, invest in it, and protect it with everything we've got. Of course, in all this, it's important to remember that if it wasn't for our own Scottish Parliament, the Tories would right now be running the NHS in Scotland. That means our health service would have been subject to the same creeping privatisation we've seen south of the border. The powers of the Scottish Parliament, though, just like the NHS, have to be protected. Ever since the Brexit vote, Westminster has been looking to take powers away from Holyrood. They've recently passed a new law which gives Tory ministers the right to subject healthcare services in Scotland to what they call market access principles. And the law leaves the Scottish Parliament powerless to stop them. Boris Johnson's government is taking Scotland in the wrong direction, and if we don't stop them, our NHS will not be exempt. The hard Brexit they have imposed on us will squeeze the economy and the money available for public services like the NHS. The Tories' hostile immigration policy will make it harder to recruit staff, particularly for social care. A post-Brexit trade deal with the US could see the NHS pay more to American drugs companies, reducing the budget for patient care here. And the Tories have even stripped from their trade bill a clause that would have prevented any post-Brexit deals from undermining a comprehensive, publicly funded health service free at the point of delivery. These Westminster decisions will have a real impact on Scotland, and taken together, they should raise a concern for the future of our NHS. For that reason, and indeed many others, I believe people in Scotland should have the choice of independence, though of course only when the COVID crisis is over. In an independent Scotland, we'll have the powers needed for the kind of long-term recovery most people who live here want to see. We will have more powers over social security to build a fairer, more equal country for everyone. Powers over spending so we can stop wasting billions of pounds on nuclear weapons. Powers over the economy so we can put jobs first. And in an independent Scotland, we will have greater ability to protect our precious National Health Service. So in this election, if you want experienced leadership and a serious government to guide Scotland through the pandemic and into recovery, please give both votes to the SNP. If you want a bold, progressive plan for government with the remobilisation of the NHS at its heart, make it both votes SNP. And if you believe that when the COVID crisis is over, the people of Scotland should have the right to choose whether or not we become an independent country, then please cast both votes for the SNP. Thank you.